Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Hmong Women Thriving. Friends, I'm super excited about this episode today. And I know I say that in every episode, but I am really excited for this episode. I'm so honored to have Dr. Pa Vu with us today. Dr. Vu is an educator, researcher, and a storyteller. Her work really focuses on the Hmong language reclamation, literacy, and identity through community based and arts informed methods. Dr. Pa's passion for revitalizing the Hmong language and obviously empowering our community really shines through her research, teaching, and storytelling. So, in this conversation, I'm really excited because we'll be really going through her journey, her vision for the Hmong language and culture, and the wisdom that she brings to Hmong women, really navigating identity and empowerment. I'm so excited for this conversation. And Dr. Pa and I have a little history together too. She was also one of the ladies that helped create a wonderful retreat a couple years ago. And I still talk about it to this day. It's probably still one of the best trips that I had ever gone on, really being in a space with amazing Hmong women and everything like that. And, that can be an episode for another day because that was probably, again, one of the best trips I've ever taken. But, anyways, back, going on a tangent here for everyone. I'd love to obviously officially welcome Dr. Pa to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Ariel. So great to see you
Yes.
again.
Oh, yes. Same. Dr. Pa, I'd love to start by asking, how are you feeling stepping into our conversation today?
Well, I'm really excited to be talking about this with you, and thank you so much for inviting me to share a bit about what I'm doing. And I'm really excited about this, but at the same time, I'm a little nervous too because, as you know, I'm going to say this in Hmong, but it's like a sana, especially about language and culture. And everybody comes to it at a different time in their lives when different things are happening. They've had different experiences with Hmong language and culture. And some of these experiences are from people who are outside the community, but some of these experiences we engage in with people in our communities that have made the language and culture not a great place for us. So I am a little nervous talking about this, but also I would love for people just to listen and maybe engage with the content a little bit, and then they can make their own opinions about such. Like I don't want to force my opinion on anybody, but I do have an opinion about language, Hmong language, and language reclamation and language revitalization and such. So I'm happy to share that with people, and hopefully it speaks to some people's hearts and souls as it
Yeah,
does me.
thanks. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. And obviously, our conversation is something that um, I personally feel that is important. And so that's why I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. So thanks for sharing those feelings. My first question for you is what led you into education and research, and what really inspired your passion for the Hmong language reclamation and literacy?
Yeah, so I've always worked in education. I've worked in education all my life, um, ever since I was like 16 years old, maybe even earlier. But I think I want to kind of take us back a little bit because when I first finished my undergrad, which was in 2008, I'm trying to remember because I just turned 40 and now I feel like it's been a long time. But in 2008, I graduated with my bachelor's degree and I didn't know what to do. So I decided to go to school, to continue to go to school. And I went to get I went into my first PhD program at that time at UC Santa Barbara. And I just remember feeling like completely lost, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know what to do. But for some reason, I just kept doing Hmong language and Hmong education and Hmong students focused work. And that program I never finished. But then when I left, I knew that um, I left with a master's degree at that time. And I knew I wanted to work with students for a little while because I wanted to see what it felt like to directly engage with students in the community to see how they lived, to see how they're viewing and experiencing education. And so when I left, that program was 2011. And it took me like a year to find my first job, which was with the Upward Bound program at Fresno City College. It was a very diverse program. It was a smaller program, but it was very diverse. And I worked with wonderful staff and wonderful, wonderful students from all walks of life, you know, lots of different cultures, lots of different languages and such and experiences. And I just loved that. And so I continued to work with students for about 10 years before I went back to school. And it really was working with students that kind of pushed me to continue to do work with language, because I was working with a bunch of students at the university that I was working at, which was California State University, Chico. I created the storytelling program for Hmong students on that campus, because I had heard from a student that he felt completely invisible on that campus, even though he had been on that campus for 4 years. He felt like nobody had seen him, nobody heard him, like it didn't even matter that he was there. And so when I heard that, it broke my heart, and I decided to create this program where Hmong students can come together in community with staff and faculty, hear each other's stories, share their own stories through writing. And in that program, what I noticed was I noticed that a lot of students felt disconnected from their language and their culture, and and even their history, specifically their families' histories, but that they wish they could communicate better with their parents. They wish they could communicate better with their parents, and there was just a sense of regret that I heard in their voices and in the stories they share and such. And um, I was staff on campus, so I felt like even though I was able to support students, I wanted to do more. I wanted to be in a space where I could do more. And so I decided to go back to school, and I decided to focus specifically on language and finding different pathways for Hmong students, not just students, because students is a very specific category, but for the Hmong community, different members of the Hmong community to be able to reclaim their language and use it in ways that they feel bring more to their lives. And so that's what I've been doing since. And I've been kind of just collecting different strategies, learning about different ways that can really support our community and reclaiming our language so that we can continue to have our language as we evolve in this country and beyond.
Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to step, kind of into this next part of the podcast and really talking about your own personal journey and identity. So I'd love to, if you could share, growing up, what was your relationship with the Hmong language and the culture, and were there moments that really pushed you to reclaim or deepen your connection to the Hmong identity?
Well, I grew up in a small farming community in Northern California. And so um, it was 1990, and we landed in this small town in Northern California. Um, Population probably around 7,000 and such, but it had a large Hmong community there at the time. Um, and so, like many, I think, refugee children or children of refugees, I grew up really poor. I grew up really poor, and Ariel, you might be too young for this, but um, when I was growing up, we had these things. We had these food vouchers called food stamp, and so that was different from cash. So food stamp they sent every month, and then there were different colors depending on how much they're worth. And so like there were brown ones that were like $1 or something like that, and then there were green ones and there were purple ones and such. And you used those vouchers to go buy groceries at the store. And so the community, for the most part, knew anybody who was using these vouchers were really poor. And so growing up in that community, a lot of what I was trying to do was obviously on the one hand, being a kid, and I think because I was very, very lucky to have grown up in an apartment complex with a lot of Hmong people, um, I was still able to be a kid in some ways, be a Hmong kid, and you know, "Tao tao ken jong de mo mi Hmong jong de sha o shi okay." You know, we would play. I didn't play like cops and robbers that much, but we would play a lot of different things like we would play kick the can, we would play like Bomo Kitchen Dive, we would play like Nita Yutzi, play Ya, all of that, all of that really fun stuff. Um, and then like that era when marbles were really popular. We would play marbles. We would play like jacks, lashi, otsu, or like when we did it with the rocks. You didn't have the ball, but you had the rocks. Like you could just go around and find the perfect rocks that you would keep, and you would just play with those perfect set of rocks. Like all of that stuff. So I was very lucky on the one hand to have grown up in that kind of community where it still felt like there were a lot of Hmong people around, and Toch Yachondula, there were a lot of like women outside sitting together, talking, um, lo opandao te lo shita, and so you can hear that. Um, and like I said, kids playing around, and so I heard the language, and the culture was easy to see and easy to participate in. On the other hand, I was growing up as an immigrant in the US, a child of refugees. And I think that was really hard because first I had to learn I had to learn the structure of society and where I was placed in society as an immigrant and a child of refugees and an English language learner. And as you can guess, that's not very high in society. And so I had to contend with that as a child. And even like sometimes I think some of the things that really influenced the way that I looked at myself was sometimes I would go to the grocery store with my mom, and then when she's buying food, she would take out the food stamps, and sometimes we would get weird looks. Not weird, I would just say like racist looks from um, white people who are also at the grocery store. So a lot of my time was at the grocery store was trying to get what I want at the grocery store and convince my mom to buy it for me, but also trying to hide away from the cashier when it's time to pay for it so that I didn't have to be there when the food stamps were taken out. And so as you can imagine, there were a lot of those experiences where it wasn't just the food stamps, but it was other things too. It was like speaking Hmong in public and being told not to do it, or being asked like, where are you really from? Or like just being kind of singled out in your classroom as the diverse person and asking for you to speak for all of your people and such. That kind of stuff. Like I think growing up in a very small white farming community kind of created this view of myself that I didn't necessarily want to have, but that I had to learn just so that I can at least know where know where I am and know where I can go from there. And so a lot of that has really influenced my kind of like my research and where I want to go with it and such. And it didn't and it also influenced some of the things that I create. I created. So when I was really young, I've always wanted to be a writer, but I always wrote stories with white characters. To be honest, was truly, truly conscious and critical of that until I was much older. Um, and I was just telling a friend the other day that I don't think I would ever, I don't think I'm ever gonna probably write another novel or another story in English again. To be honest, I think I think I'm making a conscious decision moving forward that everything I write, that everything fiction at least I write is going to be probably in Hmong from here on out, just so that I can really center Hmong language and Hmong storytelling and such.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. Those are beautiful reflections. And Dr. Pai, I want to talk about, how has your own journey really influenced your research and the work that you do today?
I think a lot of it comes down to invisibility, um, and not seeing oneself in the things that one is exposed to every day. I was talking to somebody the other day about a trip to England, right? A trip to England. And I said, oh, yeah, I loved it. You know, it's really nice to be in England, to be in London, to be in all of the space that we've read about and such in English classes, like all our lives. And then this person said, yeah, we've kind of been shaped to really see England as this, you know, like this thing on a pedestal. Um, and this person was absolutely right. We've been when we go to school, we speak English. We read, and at least I did, and I don't know if you did that at your school, since it was like a Hmong charter school. You said, yeah. But you know, the literature was in English. It was a lot of it was focused on um, English writers, so not like American English writers, but English from England writers, British writers, you know. Um, and then there were also American writers, but they wrote obviously in English, and so I think like having been exposed to so much of this, I think at one point I was just kind of like, where's our literature, you know? Um, and why is it that I think and dream in English? You know, why is it that I think and dream in English first? And why is it that my tongue does all this funny stuff? Like it can't quite form certain words. And why does it feel like it's like tripping over itself when it's trying to say certain Hmong words? When these words are the words that raised me and the words that are connected to my parents and my aunts and uncles and connected to um, our ways of being in the world. How come it's so hard to say some of these things? And I think a part of me was just like, it shouldn't be this hard, you know? It shouldn't be this hard. And there has to be a way where we can access all of these things, our language, our culture, um, and the things that have made us who we are, without feeling this friction. And so I think because of that, I really wanted to explore some pathways to do this a little bit more, and actually not just explore, but I think far from exploring, just to kind of throw myself in and see how it is, you know, because you know, you pinch or pinch or you pick dog or you ready na or you know and so like a part of what I want to do is be courageous about just, you know, playing with the language a little bit and seeing what comes out. So a part of it is throwing myself in and seeing what comes out, especially in these kind of like arts based methods and pathways and such, to see what comes out, because I think sometimes we're in a place where, or we're put in a place where we're told that we can't, uh, if not directly, then indirectly, that we can't speak Hmong or we can't do Hmong stuff unless we do it correctly. Because you have to bet you walk on it to the new york, you might get, but you might get, but you might lie. And so we don't want to do it, but I want to move beyond that and be a little bit more courageous and just kind of do it, even though people will say things and even though I would do it wrong sometimes and such. And I think that's probably the biggest difference between me as a young woman and me now, is that right now I think for the most part you more on the um you know 做节目面前呢 and you 在做 or you like 起做嘅對咗要乜嘢，對咗要乜係面前得先嘛，要我錄寫啦面前，you know, and you 真人 try 啲啊 because 有啲冇可以拼人 try 的呢 you won't be able to do very much. And so I think it was this kind of invisibility that really pushed me to start creating things, to start like I don't know, start saying things and doing things in certain ways, so that I can open more doors for myself, but also for everybody in the Hmong community who wants to do these things, to kind of like to also offer an example of somebody who is not perfect, who is also trying to reclaim, relearn, um, the language and culture, and doing it in a way that is not hurtful, but is hopeful and is healing.
That's so inspiring, and that gives me so much gives myself so much courage and hope too, because I think sometimes I struggle with it. I
Mhm.
when I go to work, I speak English. I come home, it's just me and my partner. I mean, my fiance is Hmong too, but our main language at home is English. But
Mhm.
I'll go visit my grandma or we'll go see family, and I feel like gutom blai cha
Yeah,
like all of a
exactly.
sudden I can't speak Hmong anymore. But that gives me so much encouragement that like it's okay. Like we don't have to do it perfectly. And I mean, we'll get made fun of a little bit here and there from like the OGs or something like that. But it and sometimes that can be a little discouraging, and I feel like um just kind of reflecting on what you said, my siblings. So I'm probably the only one in my family, in my generation, I guess, that
Mhm.
can speak Hmong, understand it, comprehend it. Um, but everyone after me, it's a little harder for them, and as they are younger, it's even harder too. So I think it's discouraging for them because sometimes people can be like, "Oh, kahai or no, like why are you saying it like that, or oh, you don't understand what we're saying, or just being not encouraging." And so it's wonderful of you to be setting that example of, oh, like it doesn't need to be perfect. Trying is better than not trying at all. So
Yeah. You know, and I think trying and like being open to exposure to Hmong
mm,
language, and that, I mean, I know that I know that people have a lot of different traumas that are kind of related or associated with Hmong language and some
mhm.
of our interactions with Hmong language. Or as I say to some people, it's not the language itself. The language, your language,
Yes. Yes.
And so I try to remember that.
Yes.
I try to remember that,
Yes. Mm.
and so I think everybody's going to come to Hmong language a little bit differently. Dashima,
Mhm.
once you get there, and you're there, okay, I'm ready to be around Hmong language, to accept it, to embrace it. What I have found is that the more I'm listening to it, the more I'm engaging with it, the more I'm exposing myself to it. Once in a while, I will think in Hmong, and it'll be
Oh.
surprising. It's not it's not something.
Mm.
It'll be really surprising, and then I'll pause and I'll go, I just thought in Hmong before
Wow.
English.
Yeah.
Like one day, a couple of years ago, um, people don't think that it's very cold in California, but it does get cold. It does get
Liar.
cold.
No, I'm just kidding.
So muy nuna gnawing. And so I turned on the heater, and then at this point I was living in a place with a wall heater.
Sure.
So I turned it on, and then kumusate oli nona ya go
Mhm.
kusate shashona. And then in my head I'm thinking, oh kutsate oh, and then I was thinking, oh, that's Hmong.
You're like, "That's different."
Yeah, so I was basically like, oh, that's Hmong, and I thought of that first before I thought of the English
Mm.
word, because the Hmong word was just better for that moment than any
Yes.
English word would have been. And I love
Yes.
that, because I think our brains are so powerful, and we have these
Mhm.
long, memories that we have in our heads that we maybe sometimes have forgotten. Forgotten. That's she managed to
Mhm.
and then you have to be exposed, be lu lu, be lu bonje, be lu bonje, be lu mo, be lu yao maybe even be lu ju, to like to Hmong culture, Hmong language, Hmong sounds,
Yeah.
Hmong smells, everything. I think our brains start to recognize those things again, and then it'll come
Yes.
back.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I don't know. Sometimes that sounds a little crazy. That's Shima. That's
No.
what I believe.
No. And I feel like I isn't there a saying, or like I feel like some people talk about this too, where when you're learning a language on your own, it's really hard, but when you immerse yourself
Hmm.
in the environment, in the culture, it's so much easier to pick up, so I totally understand, and I love your point because it's so true. Sometimes the Hmong word is just easier to say, or I'll do this too with some of my girlfriends. Like, we'll be talking and then I'm like, what's the word, and then I'll say it in Hmong, and then they're like, oh yeah, yeah, I totally understand, and I'm like, I don't know what the English word is, so we'll just roll with that.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
okay. I don't want to get super academic. That's Shima.
No.
That's Shima. I think there's this concept in education and in language studies, and it's called translanguaging.
Mm,
And it's this idea that the way that Oholuna, we don't separate our languages. So you probably heard of code switching. And
mhm,
code switching is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with, where it's like, oh, I'm code switching. When I'm at home, I speak this language. When I'm at
mhm,
school, I speak this language. Or at work, I speak this language. When I'm with this person, I switch to this language.
mhm.
So the idea of code switching, it is when you kind of see languages as two or more separate things. So languages they're separate. So like English is separate, Hmong is separate. If you speak Spanish, too, Spanish would be separate.
Mhm.
And so you draw from that separate group or that separate thing when you're trying to converse in that language. Tashima in translanguaging, the way that it looks at language is a little bit differently. It's saying that your language is actually a whole thing, not separate.
Oh,
So yeah, they go hai lu hmong, they go hai lu anki na, go jo lu hmong, jo lu anki. It's kind of together.
wow.
So you're kind of drawing from that pot
Sure, sure.
of
Is
that
that why
language.
sometimes we'll like wordsmith our Hmong and English
Yeah,
words together?
yeah. That's why sometimes when you mix together, you mix it and match or
Yes.
whatever together. So sometimes, and sometimes it comes out and it's very beautiful, and it
Yes,
makes
yes.
much better sense than if you were to say them separately.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so good to know. I'll definitely have to look into that more, because that to me in my head makes sense.
Hmm.
Because you're like, it's instant, Sometimes you don't just like sit there and like, I mean, yeah, sometimes you do just sit there and think about what you're going to say, but when you're like conversing, it's like, you know, instant. So, interesting.
Right, and then whatever works best comes out first.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so imagine if you exercise your Hmong side or your Hmong, I guess, memories of these
Yeah.
words a little bit more, and go engage into Hmong people a little bit more.
Mm,
Um, Imagine what it could do for your brain, right?
yeah.
And imagine what memories it could bring up for the muscles in your brain. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's possible, and I think it'll be fun if we all do a little bit more of it.
Yeah, most definitely. Oh, that's amazing. Dr. Pai, I want to talk a little bit about, the Hmong language reclamation, and ask you, why is language reclamation such an important part of community healing and identity building?
Oh, that's such a good question, Ariel. um, and I think a lot of this comes down to erasure. Um, Language is such a big part of identity. Um, Language has a very special relationship with culture, and so we learn a lot about our culture through our languages, um, and especially in Hmong because we have an oral tradition. And so a lot of the information that our parents have, a lot of the values that they hold, a lot of um, history and such knowledge is passed orally. Um, so that's one part of it. But also, there's a lot of things that we don't teach directly that is passed through language. So maybe just the way we talk about certain things, the way we talk about certain genders, the way we talk about certain social or cultural activities and such. As we are growing up, they teach us about how we're supposed to behave in our society. And so because of that, there's a special relationship between language and culture, and culture also influences language in that way. And so there's this kind of like relationship where they're influencing each other. Um, and so I want to start with that, just so that there is this understanding that language plays a very important part in culture. Now, our community specifically, no, not specifically, but our community, like many communities that have been displaced, have gone through imperialism, colonization, war. Um, we've lost a lot of things, or a lot of things have been taken from us, and language is just one of them. For us, for our group specifically, because so we're not tied to a nation state. We don't have a piece of land somewhere that we claim as Hmong land. It's really hard for our community to go back to Hmong land and maybe have a summer or two in Hmong land and reconnect with our roots or relearn our language or such. But more opportunity in the So because of that, in many ways, our identity is even more strongly tied, I think, to our language. And I'm not saying that and I just want to be clear and say that I'm not saying like that you have to be able to speak Hmong to identify as Hmong. I'm saying that for a lot of people, being able to speak Hmong is one way to identify as Hmong. And because I know that a lot of people in our community, they don't speak Hmong anymore, and they still identify as Hmong, and as they should. And so, but to be able to speak our language is to be able to access all the things that are conveyed through our language. So whether that is history, whether that is culture, whether that is values or anything else, when we are able to speak our language, then we can access all of those things. And we can also just access the right to speak the language, because I think we often forget that we have a right to speak our language. We have a right to speak our language. We have a right to speak our language in ways that we find beneficial to us. So for me, language reclamation is definitely a community thing, but it's also very much a personal thing. And you'll hear the term language preservation used a lot. Dashima, for me, I'm intentionally shifting to language reclamation, because preservation to me is like you're trying to preserve something for the future. So you're trying to keep something. Dashima, the thing is, you have to preserve the future. In the future, yeah, tiệc có một khởi cái một chia cái một khởi chỉ hỏi lu phía sau rồi giống cái một lock na khởi rồi giống chia na yo. And then tashi no betu mo tashi no ma, the language is not being transmitted between generations that much anymore. And so yeah, they como salin daw na in the future, we don't know who's going to want to speak the language. So we can't like wait until the future. We have to do our language work now. We have to reclaim it now. We have to use it now for all the things that we want to use it for. And, for me, language speaking Hmong is about visibility. It's about rights. It's also about power. And I think that's why Kutili Sa create children's books in Hmong, Gusa create novels in Hmong, Gusa create everything that we can create in Hmong that we want to. Everything that we have in English, I want to say that we should also be able to have in Hmong, So like if we have in English, we should also have in Hmong too. And we do. We have like beautiful music in Hmong. If we have, I was talking to some friends about this. Like like really great romance novels to read at the beach in English, then we should have those in Hmong too. You know, if we have like, video games that are so fun to play that we get engrossed in for hours and hours and hours, and we're just like, you get it doing game in English, we should have that in Hmong too. So that's kind of like the, I don't know, the perspective that I'm working with, that this is all about power. It's all about visibility. It's all about seeing yourself in things. It's all about taking back what is your right that was taken from you. Um, and so that's kind of like the framework that I'm working with. But as I said, language reclamation, community, it should be a community thing, but it is also a very personal thing. So whenever I work with students, I always tell them, um, everybody everybody is going to reclaim Hmong language differently, because everybody has had a different experience with Hmong language. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to do it my way because um, I say so, but but I want you to do it in a way that's going to be healing for you. And so we need to heal with our relationship to Hmong language, because some of us have had really bad relationship with home language, and some of us need a little bit more time to heal that relationship. And this could be whether it is through therapy, or whether it is like slowly kind of engaging with only the Hmong works that speak to you, listening to only the Hmong songs that speak to you, and maybe just learning a word every month or something like that, taking it as slow as you want or as fast as you want. I think everybody has to make their own decision about how that's going to look like.
Oh, that's wonderful. There was a trend going on TikTok for a while. You were talking about, ways of, if we have these things in English, we should have these things in Hmong too. And it brought me back to this. I think this was like at the beginning of the year. One of a good mutual friends of mine started this like trend on TikTok where she would come and speak Hmong to the camera for 1 minute. And it was kind of going on during the trend of people trying to speak to the camera to get better at public speaking. But she came in with a little twist and she said she wanted to enhance the way, or just talk in Hmong, period. And it was such an amazing journey watching her throughout so she did it for 30 days, and it was so amazing, like seeing her first video up until like her 30th video. The growth was amazing. So just like ideas like that, because we're constantly on TikTok, and people are constantly
Yes.
doing trends and they're doing things that are fun. And so I hopped on the train too, and did a little bit too. And even I felt a difference every single day as I was coming to the camera and speaking to it. Mong would just come easier for me. Like the first couple days, I was like, right? Like, ha, you don't play the time, you have your line, And
Yeah.
then by like the fifth, sixth day, it was like, um, it was like riding a bike, right? Like it just the muscle, the memory muscle, just started working again. So I love
Yes.
that. Ah, that's amazing.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you for sharing that. I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember
Yeah.
that because I saw somebody doing it too. So I do remember that. I probably should have hopped on the trend to the Shimaku. Did you order busy don't
Yes. That's okay. That's okay. It's just, and I love it because it's just an idea, right? Like we can it can be anything, like that
Mm-hmm.
could in any way. And like you said, even if it's just learning a word a month,
Mm-hmm.
learning a word a week, using that word. So yeah. I love it. I love this. I love this conversation. I want to hop on a little bit to the section of storytelling and research. Storytelling is such a powerful tool. How have you integrated storytelling into your research and community work?
Yeah, storytelling is it is a very powerful tool, and for a community like ours, it's super important because what it does when we share something that we've encountered, or when we hear other people's stories, 头 um 头俾别 or we share something that we've gone through, then other people, it gives other people permission to share their stories too, and it makes them feel not so lonely anymore. And I think, honestly, I think right now we need more. We need more stories. We need more connection. And stories do build connection across these big divides, or these, I don't know, some of them feel like we can't overcome them. Um, and so I think we need stories to show each other that we're human, that we feel a lot of the same things, that we love and care for a lot of the same things. Um, and I think everybody has multiple stories in them. There are multiple stories in everyone, but there are also a lot of similarities in our stories. And I think that's why when we listen to somebody else's story, we feel heard, we feel seen, we feel like they understand us, because they're, even though our stories are very different, they do have similarities in some ways. Um, and for me, storytelling has always been a way to connect, and there are many, many ways of storytelling. So whether you're doing it through an actual story where there's, beginning, middle, rising action, falling action, conclusion, that kind of stuff, or whether you're doing it through a song or a poem, or whether you're doing it through ijakutia, um, or anything like that. The concept of a story is really about connecting and building bridges across, like, two people, two minds, two different experiences that could potentially come together. Um, and I think something that I have seen that has been done very beautifully in the Hmong community is storytelling through songs with some of our singers. I think they've just done it so. A lot of them have done it so well, so well, and because they've done it so well, they have opened the door to sharing some of our culture. I think that is harder to share. Thầu cho lâu kia, kia cho lúa này gió, thầu cho lâu kia cho lúa. Whether it's because bây giờ nung là, and we're so used to, like, the screen moving so fast that, bây giờ plus you better like start to ya, you better sam kia mu na. And so people thinking thầu cho lâu kia you na. And for our singers and our, our poets and our story writers to be able to kind of like filter this culture into a song, or like a short story or a poem, is so great. um for example, like, I'll share something with you, like, the I've just been kind of like keeping track of how many times I've heard the concept of lutia in songs, in Hmong songs. Watch, now you're gonna go listen to the songs, and then you're gonna be like, you're gonna like, oh my gosh, they're talking about lutia. So the concept of, like, tia no chichito, lutia machintia, like all of that stuff, that comes up in our songs so much. And I think what people don't realize is that this is actually a, a Hmong way of seeing and knowing the world. And so when we think about Lutiana, it's actually reincarnation. It's the concept of reincarnation, right? It's the concept of, traditionally, when you pass away, you don't just disappear. You don't go to this magical land and live there forever. The idea is that you return. You return, and sometimes that's why lovers, it means that we're going to both come back, and maybe we'll find each other again, and so this concept actually comes up a lot in Hmong songs, but I don't think, like, honestly, young people even realize that that's what they're listening to, and that's what that means. That it goes back to this idea of reincarnation and coming back from, the spirit realm, and we're going through the spirit realm, and then coming back to the human world, and living out a life again. And the same thing goes for, like, the concept of dain dao. So you hear this in songs sometimes, And in songs, they'll say, "Oh, che u dan do chi do," or "ut zai do dan do lo wo jingo," you know. So the concept of the letter, like zai dan do na dan do, is dan do that says like what your life is going to be, that you get before you come back to um, to live as a human. At least that's my understanding of it. Um, and so that comes up in songs too, and in whatever story that is being told in the song. Um, but I think maybe a lot of young people don't even realize that that's what's happening in the song. Is that there's all of these Hmong concepts of knowing the world that are being transmitted through story, but through this shell of a song, um, that is very deep and very very beautiful.
Thanks for sharing that. Every time I listen to a Hmong song now, I'm gonna reflect on our conversation.
Lutia and
Yes,
Daindara.
and I did. That's so oh, that's amazing. And even myself, I don't think I've ever correlated any of that too. So this is great. This is great knowledge for me actually. I'd love if you could kind of share a project or story that has deeply impacted you.
I think a lot of the stories that have deeply impacted me are my parents' stories. So recently, I interviewed both of my parents, and I really encourage everybody to do that. Um, I have a list of questions actually on my Instagram page that people can download if they're like, "Oh, would you both here? Not
Yes.
you."
Yes, I've used that. I
Oh, did you?
literally I've literally used that to ask questions to my grandmother. I just need to hit the record button and record her. No, they're wonderful questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I used those same questions to ask both of my parents about their lives, and I think 頭要轉路啊，頭要要是確保 why your parents behave a certain way or why they have a certain like way of looking at the world. But I think that everybody should interview their parents so that they understand where their parents are coming from, especially if your parents are refugees. Because I think when I was talking to my parents, I learned a lot about just how much they did not have, how much they did not have growing up in Laos and in Thailand and such, and it helps you to understand why they did things the way they did a little bit more, um, and it helps you heal a little bit too. At least it did for me, and it's not the only way, and it shouldn't be the only way for you to heal your relationships, but it does give you a better perspective. And so my parents, I think like just listening to their stories about, I don't know, I think Tauma, it seems like sometimes like like that English like you just feel like how did you even survive? you know, like how did how are you like this full human now? Like how did you even survive? That was wild. And I think listening to my mom, especially listening to my mom talk about not having shoes until she was like, I think she said she was like 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. Like she was just barefoot for most of her childhood. Hearing that kind of a story, it just makes me, well, it makes me like love them even more, but it makes me, I think, appreciate everything that they've done for me. And I think over the years, I've really encouraged a lot of students to retrace their families' histories and to put themselves in their parents' shoes as parents coming to the US. Like for example, for me, because I was only like 5. So my parents were in their mid-20s when they came. And but they came anyways. And to me, that's always such a powerful story of resilience, but also of love and of just the human ability to have courage and to go and to do what needs to be done. Go where you need to go, do what you need to do to survive, to thrive, to give your children a better future. Um, and those are the stories that I think we need to be the coach, you know. So especially how you know you see then it's really important that you um interview love, but also like that you chỉ cho you cho luôn hông chê because you chừng ni you cho luôn hông đâu thì you chừng toàn thôi như thế you gì thải trong gì là ở trong gì là bé trong gì you know and câu lời cho đan nên thế rồi dẫn nên chê có you cho nó cá cho lời tê tin gì and that kind of stuff like it's just all of these things are interconnected.
Thank you for sharing that. That's just another reminder for me and hopefully listeners if you're tuning in. It's such a good reminder because it has been something that I personally have been wanting to do for a really long time. And I think before, when I was younger, I think I did it once for like a school project, but
Mhm.
we weren't asking like the deeper questions. We were just like, who are you? Like, where are you from? Like, all of that good stuff. But now that I'm older and I'm comprehending things and understanding and all of that, like, it's still, I personally feel really called to record my grandma specifically, right? Because she's the only one left. Like,
Oh.
it's just my grandma. So yeah. Yeah, it's a good reminder. Thank you for
Yeah,
that reminder.
I encourage you to do it. I had a friend who her dad had passed away, and
Mm.
I was telling her how I wanted to record my parents, and she pretty much said, "Có chừng to đó chị nè," you know. And then I don't know if she knew that she was saying this, but she was like, "Ôi chà, chúa luôn đi." You know, Hmong people.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ví
They're
dụ
like,
như là
hello.
you giờ chỉ có thể là hành đỏ you nó tàn đó nè.
That's so funny. Otoma.
Then I do, so she was like, "Ôi chà, chúa chừng to chị nè." So
You're like, oh, okay.
yes, and I never forgot that. So then of course I was like, nếu hay cho thế mà chả trụ lên tỏ
Yeah.
chi nhé.
Yeah, ma. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, okay. Okay, biggie. Biggie gumao. That's
Yeah,
so funny.
and I think a part of me was also kumunji, I don't know, like I think I was also like a little bit unsure about how I was gonna do it. So so I figured out how to do it. It took a little bit of time, but I was like, okay, I think, and I got like a lapel mic too, so that I could put it
Yeah.
on their shirt so that they can speak into the mic. But I think what helped was I'm just gonna share my process because there's a this is
Yes, yes, please.
So I think what I did was I just kind of like introduced the idea a little bit early before I did it. So it wasn't like I just came with my camera and my like
You're like,
my
sit down.
sit down. I'm gonna interview you. So it wasn't like that, but
Mhm.
but I just kind of said like, oh, này thế gì, bé nhiều lần á, chị cô sa hay tiền chơi thế rồi cô yêu sa cơ ní cho đánh nên là xin cho nên nên chơi nên khi mình chỉ sang đấy cái thằng này chỉnh lúa nếu nên lý trà thằng này giờ nếu nên lý trà thế nên gì nên từ thế tên đầu cho cô cũng có cái chơi bây giờ mình nhỏ thế thì tàu nếu cho lúa chơi nữa rồi tại xin nó mà yêu cho bao hun nó sẽ yêu cho bao thaki cho cho thaki yêu trong lý trà so I said stuff like that and then I said
Mhm.
to i always the no share i ai thì nó share ya mo shi hở nó cũng mà li đấy mà
Yes.
giàu ấy cũng mà li go chain and then they'll say something like chỉ bảo yêu hai lý trả liao you know sometimes you're phải hai lý nữa nữa
Yeah.
cho bố muốn lên thứ sáu long or something like that
Yes.
So then you go, Mama, or,
Mhm.
bây giờ lùa chơi này, họ tiệt thầu, chú muốn giờ lò, bây giờ chỉ bảo ra chỉ đi về,
Mhm.
hiện tại giờ mất cái chơi,
Yep.
thầu, chú muốn giờ lò lỡ, chị lên từ sầm nông thì tông nông, lên từ
Mhm.
sai thì tàu sai, and then I'll tell them, có chỉ bảo thảo là chú ở chào, chúng mới cho lù, mà không có, and then I show them the question.
Yes. Yes.
Đúng mới cho
Oh,
lù mà
that's
mà
wonderful.
linh có, chỉ
Mhm.
có mà cũng nuôi chạy, chỉ có mà biệt lên tờ xứ, chỉ hay để có sạp biển gì nào, có biệt to hay có chỉ sạp biển lỡ, nó cũng mà nuôi gì, ấy
Mhm.
mà lấy cao lên tờ xứ. And so that's pretty much what I said to them.
That's wonderful. Oh, that's such a great example. And I'm sure hopefully that'll help the listeners kind of get ready to have that conversation too. And I'll link Pa or Dr. Pa's questions in the description below too because I've used those questions on my grandma, and sometimes you don't even need like the rest of the questions because they'll
Yeah,
just like keep going,
yeah.
and then I'll just be like, why? And then she'll like, just keep going, so they're good starter questions. They're
Mhm,
great. And I love that, I love that what did you say? Got that nhiên lâu nhiên lợi yo
mhm.
and nhiên lợi nu, bé yin sam long and all of that because it's true. Like I think I'm working on a personal project to complete my family's family tree,
Mhm.
specifically my grandma and her family,
I
her
remember you posting something about that.
yeah, yeah, I am working on that. And it's just so interesting, like if I didn't get a chance to work on that, I wouldn't have been able to ask certain questions for my grandmother or hear certain stories. Like I found out that she had a younger sister who passed away when they were um coming to or when they were going to Thailand, when they were, what's the word? Why am I losing that word?
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
she had shared that with me, and I was like, I have lived with you. Like I know all of your siblings, and
Uh-huh.
I am just finding out now, And so yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to ask, and I really love this question was, I asked my mom, I asked my dad too, but my mom is just much better at the storytelling than my dad is. It could be a gender thing because
Yeah,
and so it's probably easier for her to just
sure.
tell me some of her stories. But one of my favorite questions to ask them was, "Who were your friends when you were young?" "Tao có chuyện nhiều giàu lắm, có chuyện phong
Yes.
tư này nhỏ." And I just learned so much about my mom, especially because you know, and then and so you never think
Mhm.
like, "Thôi là lùa là chuyện phong lắm tư nè." And it was really nice to hear my mom talk about her friends and who were her best friends and how they loved each other, and then how they freaking reconnected over Facebook of all things. But
Wait, I love that! The power of social media.
across like continents. That's what's
Oh my gosh, wait, that's insane.
yeah. My mom had one of my mom's best friends when she was a little girl, moved to France.
Wow.
I know, and so she said last year or something like that they reconnected and they were talking
Oh
about,
my gosh.
yeah, how they when they were young they had made a promise that they would marry the mailing you ate the Hmong Womxn na, and that they fulfilled that promise because they all married Hmong Womxn.
Oh my gosh, wait, that's so cute. Oh, I love that so much. That's girlhood right there. Like,
I
that's
know,
literal girlhood. Oh.
right? That's so cute.
I'm gonna cry. That's so sweet. That's so sweet.
I know, and I was like, and
Wow.
I think I never would have had that story or knew that I wouldn't know that story today if I didn't ask that question.
Yeah. Oh.
So it's these questions that you think wouldn't matter that helps you see kind of another layer of your parent. And
Mhm.
the reason why I also encourage bây giờ Lua to ask our parents and our grandparents these questions too is because our in the Hmong community, we're a very young community, and so
Mhm.
bây giờ lâu mà so we have to do it right now.
Yep.
Chỉ muốn hở li ho, chỉ hở chỉ tao yêu li ó. Chỉ hở chỉ tao năng tư li nữa. So like you have to do it now. You could this weekend. Cũng muốn hở na, really like start the process.
Mhm.
Because you just never know. Yeah, li bata ko hai be chua pa hun nu no spe chi ba na.
Yep.
And so taki anything could happen.
Mm. Oh, I feel like we can talk about this for as long as time can go on. This is so amazing. Pa, I want to quickly talk about, kind of community and empowerment.
Mhm.
My question for you is, how can parents and educators and even young Hmong people themselves get involved in kind of the movement of reclaiming the Hmong language?
Well, like I said earlier, I think reclamation also happens at the individual level, not just at the community level. So there is individual level, there is family level, and then there is community level. So um, I think everybody needs to make a decision on whether Hmong is something that is important to them. You know, if it's important to you and you want to reclaim it, then you need to make a plan on how to do it. You think about ping tao so na có tự chi cho cả ta or toàn cho nó ha có tụi mình nhiều tụi mua nên gặp lỗ xong tụi mua tụi mua nữa là tụi mua cần tao nên tụi mua nhỏ nữa là chuyện này chỉ là hai lối loạn kiến tao so that kind of stuff. So I think there are many different ways that people can do it, but I think the first thing is to really think about whether you want to reclaim Hmong language, whether it has a part in your life, and something that I think is some people are not gonna. I don't know how people are going to relate to this. Dashima, the way that I am starting to kind of think about Hmong language in many ways. Well, there are two ways I'm starting to think about Hmong language. So one way is and both of these ways come from like indigenous methodologies, indigenous ways of thinking, as well as indigenous language revitalization and that kind of stuff. Dashima, one way is to think about Hmong language not as like just a bunch, not as like words and grammar and sentences and such, but to really think about Hmong language as like a relative. And so you must say the Hmong language you have to, it's you have to think on it. You have to how would you connect with it? Would you welcome it home? Would you prepare a meal for it? Would you, make a bed for Hmong language? What place would it have in your home? You have to a uncle, you have to aunt, you have to cousin, sister, brother. So that's one way to think about it, to kind of reframe our relationship to Hmong language, or that we think what Hmong language is. That itu, you don't even have to say itu tinning because it's not itu tinning, it's something different. But itu or you, you know, you have the new thing, you and what do you prepare for the language? So that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is to think about reclaiming Hmong language as a process for healing. And one of the ways that I've been thinking about it is I've been kind of looking at it as sometimes tao you bong cho luna, you bong ya chi na sometimes you bong ya chi so you bong pli là she you bong yeah là she you bong liu te chờ, you bong iling niang zi or something like that. There's harm that's done to your body, your soul, your mind, your heart, and so you have to heal that. And so it's the same thing with tao you when you get your language taken from you and your language is erased through school or through racism or through displacement and migration and such. When that language is taken from you, to me it feels like something has been taken from you, something that is connected to your spirituality even. And so sometimes I think about language erasure, language loss as a process of spirituality even. And that sometimes tell you no, you sometimes even hearing the language makes you feel better. You know, we forget that. We forget the power of Hmong language now. And so one way to think about it is also to think about language reclamation as healing, and that it can be healing to our soul, to our spirit. Um, and that if we think about the mind-body connection, that maybe if we can heal our soul, our spirit, our mind, then maybe we can also heal whatever's going on in our bodies if we have physical ailments. Um, so I think those are some of the more conceptual things to think about for whether you are a parent, teacher, or a young person, or whether you don't count those yourself as in those categories, but maybe maybe and you live like in the city and you live far away from your family and your community, and you're like, okay, how can I reclaim Hmong language? So those are two conceptual ways to do it. Tashima, like I said, learn one word at a time. Go to Hmong events. Engage with Hmong people when you see them. Son chai. Some people don't want to speak Hmong, and so they will make that very clear to you. And I think that's not going to be an issue. But some people will welcome the opportunity to speak Hmong. I love going to the farmers market and then just starting with "Niam Hmong Tala," or if it's a younger person, I often start with "Oh, because I'm not sure. But I also love like tell you travel na tining halumong na. I get so excited. I just want to go talk to them. And so I I would love for everybody to kind of get to that moment where you're not tining halumong, and then you get really excited. And it's not like you go, mong, but you actually but you actually get really excited, or sometimes when you mong ship on, sometimes there's that too. but but it's really great to like engage with each other and to just talk to each other and such. So I encourage like all of that. And then lastly, engage with things that are coming out in Hmong. So whether that is like Hmong books, children's books, Hmong content that's online and such, engage with it. Speak Hmong at home as much as you can and such. Support Hmong programs in your community. Whether that is through donations, through sharing on social media, through attending. So you just by being there is really important to healing the the young speaker that still lives in your heart. That is still wondering if Hmong is something that they want to pursue. So just being in the presence of Hmong, I think helps with that. And then starting that journey of like trying to see what Hmong can do not can do, but what role Hmong can have in your life, whether that is something that is always present or whether that is something that is only present here and there. And also go to community meetings when they are talking about Hmong language classes, when they're talking about cutting, especially Hmong language classes, or keeping them. We need more Hmong language classes in our community. We need more Hmong language teachers. We need more Hmong, period. So có bao giờ họ có lu rõ họ có tìm hiểu lu chỉ cần tới mua ý hong a look here hong su, and that class is going to be cut and it's going to the school board. Then you go to the school board. You get all your friends and everybody is attending the school board meeting tonight, and you don't even have to say anything. You can just stand there and make your presence known that you support that class. And even if your kids don't take that class, everybody go, and then afterwards you can go to happy hour or something to celebrate. Make it fun. Make it fun.
No, I love that. I love that. Go to Unison after. If you're from Minnesota, go to Unison, cup and cheers, okay? Grab yourself a drink and pat yourself on the back for going to a meeting. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I feel like we can go on and on about this topic, this conversation, and that just means that we need to have more space for these types of conversations. But we are coming close to the end of the podcast, and I'd love to kind of ask you the three core questions that I ask all of the guests that come on. My first question for you, Dr. Pot, is where can listeners learn more about your work and connect with you?
Yeah, there are a few places they can learn. So if you're on Instagram, you can go to my Instagram page, which is at Hmong Language Movement. And then I also have a website that is does all of the work that are also on Instagram, which is hmonglanguagemovement.com. Um, and I have a personal website too, which you can just Google, but it's bypavu.com. But yeah, that's where you can mainly learn about some of the things I'm doing, as well as get some support with language learning if that is something that you're interested in. And if you follow me on Instagram, there is you learn a few things too.
Yeah. Oh my god. I was just gonna say I love your Instagram page and I love I love when New Year season rolls around because you always have the really fun um I don't want to call them memes, but the like ways to like hit on
Oh,
like
oh, the pickup lines.
yes, yes, the pickup lines. I love those. Every time the New Year season comes around, I'm like always cracking up because I'm like cringe, but like period. Like that's how they used to have these conversations, you know?
And I think that's how you got to approach it, right? Because
Yes.
we don't say those things anymore, but it's still kind of funny to like read them and
Yes.
and see how like they did it back then, and then
Yes.
and then and then it's also a way to be funny. So if you're like, oh, I really like that
Mhm.
goat, maybe I could try this with them, and maybe that'll start a conversation.
Actually, it's such a good going back to, talking to your parents or your grandparents, like I've actually asked my grandma like, "Has anyone ever said this to you before?" And I'll like read it and then she'll be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah." And then she'll like tell me funny stories, she'll be
Oh,
like,
that's so cute.
"Oh, taco man," like, blah 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 and stuff like that. And I'm like, "Okay, grandma." Like
That's very cute. I like that.
yes, yes, it's super super fun. My next question for you, what does being a Hmong woman mean to you?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I think for me right now is what it means is being a Hmong woman means being courageous enough to forge your own way, um, to forge your own way without forgetting the sacrifices that the women in the past have
Hmm.
made, or to remember the paths that they have paved so that we can be here today. And to also remember that we have, I think the story that people want to paint about us is that we have been we have only been oppressed,
Hmm.
and that we have not had any agency in the way that we do things. But that's not 100% true. Women have been part of Hmong women have been part of everything. you know um but our stories are just not told very often. And so I think for me, being a Hmong woman is remembering that we have been a part of everything, and sometimes we have led some of these things. Tashi ma chu ya te kyo da ning no plo lo sin na lo shi chi ha te lo plo lo tashi ma te ro lo mo ning te mo flo fa lo na. And now it's time to unearth some of these stories, and it's time to forge our own ways in the world. Um, yeah, and that's kind of like what I think about when I think about being a Hmong woman, even with like
Hmm.
even when it's scary.
Yeah.
even when it's scary, and even when the community, even when you know the community isn't going to quite agree with everything you do, um, to have the courage to follow to follow your gut, to follow um, to follow the the passion that you feel in your heart and in your
Mhm.
soul.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. My last final question for you, and I feel like you've shared so many nuggets of your own wisdom with us already, but could you share a quote or a piece of wisdom that inspires you and that you'd like to leave with the listeners?
I'm going to share this because I just heard. I listened to some Hmong stories on YouTube, and recently I heard one about divorced women, um, and how divorced women are, just horrible people.
Yeah.
And so I think something that has that I've remembered and that has inspired me in the past is that we need to reframe the way that we look at um, women who are no longer tethered to a man.
Mm-hmm.
um, and this was a little while ago when I was working on this project with Elizabeth Yang and Hmong Women Take on the World, and I still remember it to this day. That this quote that says, um, "Nu chi ha pan dao, ni ha pa di."
Mm.
Um, and so I think a lot of women stay in relationships that don't do anything for them, and in fact harm them. And I just I don't know why that quote is speaking to me today, but I think maybe it's just because I recently heard that story on YouTube, and I wanted to um, remember that quote a little bit more. There is another way to be alive. There's another way to live, and it doesn't have to be tethered to a relationship that there where you are hurt all the time, or constantly being pushed down and such. And it's kind of funny because this has nothing to do with what we were talking about. But girl, this is
No.
what I'm feeling right now.
Yes. No, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe somebody needed to hear it today while they're listening to the podcast. Who knows? Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Pa, I appreciate your time and all of the wisdom that you've shared with me and the listeners. And I am so, so, so forever grateful for your work, everything that you're doing, and everything that you've shared again with us today. So thank you for coming on Hmong Womxn Thriving.
Thank you, Ariel. I love having this conversation with you and just kind of catching up a little bit, but just talking about this topic. So thank you for
Yes,
making space for this topic that is
of
so close to
course.
my heart.
Yeah, most definitely.